Hello, everyone. We'll get started in a few moments. If you could please sign into the agenda and add any opens. We're going to start at section 411 on the plan if there are no opens. Hope everybody's having an awesome Black Hat week. I know I am. I have my black hat.
It's a lovely black hat.
Why, thank you. It's one of 8 I'll be wearing during our podcast we're recording this week.
How many podcasts?
8.
You have 2. You have 8 podcasts and a hat for each of them.
I do. A black hat for each of them.
That is excellent preparedness. Yeah.
Which doc, Emily? The plan? I'm guessing the plan.
Yep, the draft plan, the one that's linked in the agenda.
I thought I had that set for anybody with a link, but it's Linux Foundation. One with a link. Go ahead and refresh that. You should be able to get in now.
Good to go, thank you.
Welcome. All right, group. Do we have any new friends stopping by today to say hello and help us with education? Doesn't look like it, but my eyes are terrible. Do we have anyone that's willing to help Dave and I take notes today? Please.
I will try, but I'm not really sparking too brightly today. So,
Oh, you spark joy, Vicky.
oh gosh.
Thank you. I appreciate the help. Do we have anyone that has any opens they'd like to talk about before we move on to our continuation of the plan review? Okie dokie. But I have one open. The OpenSSF is having their European conference in September in Dublin, Ireland. And I just got notification that they will be officially doing an OpenSSF day again. So if anyone here is interested, I think they're going to have a real short call for papers. If we're interested in talking about anything like the education work or any of the other working groups you're affiliated with for the foundation, keep an eye out for an email from Jory about that. I'll be there. It'll be quite exciting. And the goose hat will be there. I know everyone's looking forward to the goose hat again.
Sonotype is sponsoring that, so I'm just saying, if you want any cool swag, let me know.
Curb's the king of swag.
All righty. I think for for example, the vulnerability disclosures working group, we have a document that is about ready for publication. So I think that's something we'll probably submit to talk at OpenSSF Day. But if we had anything, or even if we were looking to potentially do some type of meetup or targeted collaboration. So for example, let's say a bunch of us were there and we really wanted to talk about section 411 in the plan 2.0. We could get together and have a little structured in-person conversation potentially to suss out metrics. I know Dave loves metrics.
I do love metrics.
So speaking of loving metrics, if I could ask everyone to go to Plan 2.0. Are there any other opens? All right, let us look at Plan 2.0. Section 411 is very sparse, but we decided we would like to have some type of measure of success criteria. Does anyone have any ideas of things we could measure now, or do we want to postpone that for a small group conversation focused specifically on that topic? Hi, David.
Hi. I mean, one thing we can measure, which in fact we at OpenSSF already do, is just at least measure the number of people signing up for a course. For not edX, we also measure the number of completions too. As it may seem, we can't get that data from edX apparently. I don't know the full story there, but we can at least measure number of people who started and ideally number of people who completed a course.
Dave's actually doing it in the right place. I'm sorry.
Excellent.
We also could do number of certifications achieved.
Right. That's
badges?
what I meant by completions. But yeah,
Oh, okay.
some sort of.
David, do you know what the current completion rate is for your cybersecurity cert?
No, for several reasons. First of all, we don't get the data from edX. We do get certain numbers from LF's training and certification, but it's a little misleading because first of all, not only do a lot of people not finish, but people take a varying amount of time. So I can tell you how many people have started, and I can tell you how many have completed, but I can't tell you the percentage because there's a pipeline between those two stages. Does that make sense? So I can give you numbers for the number of completed for the LF training one. If you give me a couple minutes, I can go hunt that up.
Yeah, it's not urgent. We can handle it on another call, but I would like those numbers before I'm going to try to get a surge into that and see if we can change those completion rates.
Okay. Yeah, I will say, yeah, we had something like 400, over 400 people starting the course in the last 2 weeks. Which is what I remember. And of course, the number of people who complete is going to be far smaller, both for time and also people drop. I don't actually think that's a failure, by the way. If someone starts a course and doesn't finish, they still know more than when they started.
Do we have any other ideas on things we might want to measure as part of the overall education effort? The class is definitely a big one. Do we want to? Yes.
I do. I would love a metric to be included in this at the maintainer level. I think that we should be having a metric of what sort of levels and rates of OSSF scorecard compliance.
So would you like as measured by scorecard improves security posture of maintainers? Do you want to commit to a percent or do you want a number?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to see 100%, but I'd be happy with 80. Yeah, I mean, the end goal of this all is not just to make people smarter, it's to fix the ecosystem, right? So let's get one of those high level KPIs that will show us if we're actually benefiting.
Now, the boggle with scorecard, for example, is not everyone that participates in scorecard is going to be taking the class or reading our output. So we'll have some influence on some subset so that it won't be a direct the metric won't be a direct correlation of our efforts, but I think it's a nice one to look at.
Emily has a question.
Yes.
So I'm curious, a lot of the metrics and discussion and other information in this plan is largely focused on individuals that have already reached a professionalization level, either in their maintainership work as a hobby or as part of their career growth. There's nothing in here to cover any outreach with pre-university level education systems or any intent, it looks like, to focus on potential success criteria beyond a 1 or a 2 year mark for whether or not a higher lower primary education is actually going to be effective over time for like high school age going into university and evaluating whether or not that early level of engagement was successful in improving outcomes at the university level. So I know this is a broader question, and I apologize that I am late to this group in asking it, but what is defined as success underneath of the mobilization plan? Is it purely at the university and professional career level for maintainers or other individuals in the software development ecosystem, or is the intent to actually expand that and go beyond just what on the surface is the majority of the open source community? Because it's a lot deeper than that.
We've talked numerous times about secondary education, trade schools, things like Girls Who Code, organizations that are focused on second careers. So we're not exclusively focused on university and college. My personal boggle is I very much support it, and we can put whatever we want to in the plan. We're going to need to have people that are willing and have expertise in focusing on those areas. I can't do that myself, but I definitely, if the group wants to go that way and have specific metrics, for example, I fully endorse that, but we'll need to find people that are going to do it.
So then my recommendation for this particular section is that any of the success criteria should be limited in scope, at least for year 1 and year 2, to the trade school and university and professional maintainer level that we're focused on, and should not exclude any potential success criteria of early development programs.
Agreed. And especially like at the DC meeting you were at, there was a lot of interest in the room about high school and secondary education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. So certainly there's a lot of discussion about high school. I do think that for like measuring the some of these courses, like the online courses, they don't care what age you are. I mean, if you're 9 years old and you can handle it, go for it. But I do think that there's going to be a need for things that are more specialized for high school and so on, and it would be great to figure out measures for that.
Do we want to make a commitment to something like mentorship or we've talked about office hours potentially, or shadowing? Do we make any types of commitments around that to measure against? Try to make X number of mentorship connections, or have.
Funny you should mention that, Crow, because I just finished writing a little article. Don't tell anybody. But I actually have a position on that, which is perhaps a little cynical is the wrong term, because I don't actually think it's cynical. I think it's a realist. Basically, my view right now is that grassroots education requires grass. Mentorship is great. I'm all for mentorship. We have but the mentorship implies a relatively small number of learners matching to a mentor.
Yeah.
We just don't. We have too many developers who don't know enough yet. So I'm not. That's not saying that mentorship can't happen. It can. But at the scale of the lack of knowledge that we're talking about, I think that we've got to be careful to not oversell what we can frankly do with a mentorship program. I think computer based training. I'm sorry, I'm muggling over my words, but computer based training, or one person for many students, I think is going to be a key part, at least for starting out. And then we can, of course, if we can do, what was that? What was the other thing? The hey, ask me anything.
Like office hours, ask us anything.
Office hours. I don't know if we'll be able to handle it, but we can always try as an experiment and see what happens. Anyway, I'm gonna pull my hand down. Get rid of my old hand.
Yeah.
Sal?
Okay. Yeah. So I have done this before, right? For cloud computing and neuroscience, no one knew how to do it. And a year later, we had 2,000 people upskilled in being able to do this on Azure or AWS, right? So that's where I'm pulling from with all this. I think we need to be clear about our year 1 versus year 2 goals. I do want numbers in year 2 around successful mentorship, and mentorship for me means to professionalization, right? I don't care where they come from, I care where they come. I do believe, right, what we need to do in this first year is make sure that we get several thousand people through this basic security training. We need the maintainers to have their basic functionings up. Right now, you can't do a lot of security contributions to a lot of these projects because they simply have not set up a way to do that standardly. But if we are successful here, and this is really my end goal, I do want on every major project at least one formally identified cybersecurity maintainer on every major project, right? That for me would be a very good success metric.
Probably a year 2 goal, but I think that is a pretty awesome goal and obviously measurable. What does the team feel about that? Do we want to maybe commit to that for a year 2 goal? Each, of the top 100 critical projects, everyone has a trained cybersecurity, application security person as part of the team, core team.
I think it's an awesome goal. I don't think you'll achieve it because people actually have to agree to it, but that's okay. You shoot for the moon and you get higher than you were before.
We're gonna hop on Brian's rocket.
Yeah, so I mean, we have to consider also that we are potentially creating a new class of maintainer, which is an employable class, right? So it doesn't exist yet. In a year's time, it absolutely could.
Love it. Eric.
Yeah, so just to kind of piggyback a little off of that, we talked a little bit previously about the potential, or at least I did, and had some comments on it about potentially building something of a mastery program, which provides the levels as people get trained up in this capability. Obviously, they're experts in the industry already, but it's something of adding a train the trainer type of capability to this, and really starting to get to a point where you have these experts. But above and beyond that, thinking just in the training in and of itself, is it makes sense, as we've talked about, building like series of webinars and other things to address these and help to train people above and beyond just taking the certification classes, to have a scope of those where the office hours is one potential option, but also a queue of where are these types of potential security beneficial webinars where people can submit requests for that information, or ideas to continue to build out that series, versus having somebody live consistently, knowing that the pool of people to do that is smaller. So that's one kind of question. And the other part is what you were just talking about. Is it potentially, we have best practices badges for applications to be secure and being and knowing that some of these projects are smaller and they don't necessarily have a budget where they could hire somebody in that role, but would require a volunteer for that security resource on every project. Is it a scenario where the incentive is some sort of industry recognition or a Linux Foundation where they have to certify at a higher level by providing that resource consistently on their projects, not just getting the best practice badge? It becomes maybe an advanced best practices or a master security project, or something to that degree. And just some thoughts.
Yeah, we have a lot of tools that we can throw at this, and electronic badges is one of the easiest, and it's kind of up to us to help formulate how ways we want to entice people to entice and reward people to do this.
Crow.
Yes, David.
Two things. First thing is I think there's a lot of good suggestions and conversation here. We want to try and avoid digging too deeply into the weeds on these so we can get through the rest of the plan hopefully today. And again, there will be smaller groups created for some of these tasks, and that's where I think a lot of the details will come out. The second and more important thing is Emily suggested a alternate wording to 4.11, which I have put into the middle section.
Mhm.
All programs outreach and engagement efforts will include success criteria that show effectiveness of the program beyond completion rates prior to their implementation.
Yeah, thank you, Emily.
If everyone's
You're
cool with
good
that.
at words. Yeah, I'm good with it. Everybody else fine with Emily's suggestion? Another thumbs up, a nod, a thumb. All right, great. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I agree, David. If you have additional thoughts, please place those as comments into 411. And then as we do split off into smaller groups focused on the targeted areas, keep that in the back of your mind. We want to make sure we have a means to measure the desired outcome for each task here. Let's move on to the future, where we're going to have our silver spacesuits and flying cars. Section 5 is our desire with 5.1 that the most critical education materials are localized into 5 languages, which sure sounds like a measurable OKR for me. So do we agree after year 1, we want to target more globalization of the materials? Got some head nods.
Quick clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
Because we talked about, I apologize, Vicky, I did not mean to interrupt you.
It's okay. No.
Because we talked about programming languages here, I'm assuming that we mean spoken and written language, speech.
Yeah. If we say programming languages, I presume we mean programming languages, not natural languages.
Okay, the reason why I'm asking is because a lot of the OpenSSF documentation does talk about language ecosystems, and it just refers to them as languages. And
Oh, okay. It doesn't say programming languages.
It doesn't say that here, but I wanted to double check which language we were talking about.
There's a clue at the start of that sentence, localization. That to me means translation, and that would be spoken and verbal. We address computer languages above, but this particular item is we want to make sure we would like to have the contents translated to Mandarin, to Spanish, to Portuguese, whatever the most important languages we have, and then I ideally make a plan to continue that effort to additional languages. Vicky.
I am a huge fan of localization of all the things. Yay. But I also would like to be realistic. Is this not something that's possible in the first year?
This is after year 1.
After year 1, so in year 2, is that what we're talking about specifically, or
We
are
would
we
be
talking?
starting in year 2.
Okay, because year 15 is also after
Oh.
year 1, and that's a completely different sort of target than year 2. So I do want to make sure that, we're not trying to bite off more than we can chew. I perhaps setting a percentage that by end of year 2, we will have at least 75% of our resources translated into at least one other human language, or something like that to get us going. And that certainly is a stretch goal that I just threw out there, but
Yeah, can we use the word localized, not just translate?
Sure. Sebastian.
Open source, we could do whatever we want.
Yeah, the problem is translate is often not quite enough. So
Yeah, no, I agree. Totally. Yeah. I will defer to Emily.
So I know that this is for year 2. Within CNCF, within the security tag, we've always had open PRs or open issues for the community to provide translation services, particularly if they are experts in a domain area as well as well known within their region because they're going to be speaking fluently and they'll understand the English. Is there anything within this document or any reason that we would want to prevent community members who are language experts because it's native to them from actually translating that material prior to the year 2 mark, at the very least to start those discussions?
Patches are always welcome. So if somebody has expertise and passion, I would not turn them away.
So then the next portion of that would be that the educational material needs to be accessible in a format that allows them to provide that translation and a corresponding review.
Yes. Where would we put that? If we make that as a meeting note and find a spot in the plan to address that as part of our year 1 work, that we stage things or provide things in a way that they allow future access. I don't want to lose that point. That is important. So if it's all locked up in my Google Drive, it doesn't do anybody any good. Is there anybody from Google on the call today? I can say that. All right. And just going forward, we're going to propose this plan. It's going to be funded for however that process ends up being. And then at the end of year 1, I would imagine the program is going to evaluate how we did, adjust the year 2 and beyond plans. And I think this will be a continual kind of roadmap, tweaking and adjusting. So we write it down today. It doesn't mean that in year 3 nothing happens or we stop translating. But just directionally, we want to get things set up, and we want to, obviously, localization is important to us, so we'll make sure that that's in there.
We will have to deal with figuring out exactly which languages. I will say that gets, life gets complicated. Okay, Chinese. Are we talking simplified Chinese? I'm guessing. Hindi. Well, wait a minute. There's also Urdu. So life is complicated. The world is a complicated place.
Yeah, but
and a lot of that's going to come into who's available and who's willing. If we've got someone who comes along and they want to translate it into something a bit more obscure, then great, let's start there. But there's only so much we can define there. This is open source. I'm sorry, Sal, I cut you off. I apologize.
Sorry, I cut you off. No, I do think the CNCF's community approach to this is really good because what we're talking about, realize that a lot of this was developed in English and there's a lot of weird language that's very colloquial to white Western culture. So when you're translating it, like supply chain, right? It's hard to say that in some languages. So I really like the approach that CNCF has taken, where I think if we do want to identify leaders, so this may not be a full-time role. If we want to identify someone who may have a paid role around language, great. But the way that they do it is they ensure that there's a minimum number of people engaging on a specific topic. They've got their own space in Slack, and they all have consensus before making it publicly known. And I think that's a really good approach to this because a rote translation is not going to work for many of these.
Agreed. Mr. Wheeler.
Yeah, I actually having run some translation efforts on the badging application, I will say that generally having someone lead for each language to deal with things like, Sal's example is a great one. How do I translate supply chain? Word for word is rarely the correct answer. So sometimes that's the right answer, but basically making a call, having the discussion, and then being able to stick with it so that it's because if you have to define a term, you have to do that in all languages. But once you define the term, consistently using that term is, I think, a big trick. Frankly, not that different from writing in any language. Frankly, as far as use consistent terms, whatever they are.
Krob, you had a note here to make a decision about this one. Is the estimate sufficient for translation into 5 languages? And what about ongoing costs? Have we answered that? Do we need to answer that, or can we table that since this is a year 2 item?
I think we can table that for the smaller group of us that picks this up. We'll need to do a little more research.
Mhm.
Um,
David, what you do, man?
Uh,
David
Just delete
Wheeler,
the middle column.
shit can of the plan.
I don't think I did that.
Yes, you did.
Oh, I did. Oops.
Oh.
Okay. Well, I undid it too.
I'm gonna revoke your
Thank you for
document
calling me out.
privileges, sir.
I meant to do something on the third column, not the second.
Please.
No worries.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be a homework item that gets assigned. I think we have a lot of good people we can lean into at the CNCF, at the LF that have done translations we can learn from and potentially open source some of their processes or maybe even suppliers. Let us move on to 5.2. We had talked about earlier in the plan about hiring people that are going to be focused on higher education or particular groups like the historically Black colleges or anything that requires a kind of a specialized skill set. So this item 5.2 is just expanding the people that already exist. We probably should note what this builds upon. Does anyone have any
For
comments
these,
or suggestions?
I do
Please.
have two notes on this, because I mean, this is above and beyond the initial support that we're giving. The two labels that I think would be really important here for these two roles would be a focus on traditionally underrepresented in tech
Yes.
and one specifically focusing on untraditional pathways to professional careers.
Okay.
That's a different skill set. It's going to need a strong digital skill set. But I think that would really make sure that we can meet our goals.
I like the specificity. Could I get you to potentially type that in?
Yeah, I was gonna ask the same thing. That was said very eloquently, and I didn't get all the words.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I think that's again one of our other goals is we want to make. I think in general, content is delivered to a standard group of people fairly well-ish. I mean, we're trying to focus on expanding the reach, especially in trying to draw more people into the field from all walks of life and learning abilities. And actually, making those hires specific towards us helps us be more successful in bringing that skill set in. If we target this role is for this. I like that. Any additional thoughts about expanding the relationships of the program?
Is that Emily who's typing?
Sal.
Well, yeah,
Sal
Sal's
first.
putting the roles in.
Yep.
Emily put
Very
a
important.
suggested rewording in column 2, I think, for 5.2 as a whole.
Manage your relations with organizations, universities to ensure personnel and volunteers in the space of focus.
Yeah, I would ask for, let's not forget the traditional universities as well. So because we want to hit all cylinders. I'm fine with, by the way, the traditional, non-traditional pathway division, but I'd like to observe at least the numbers that I've seen. It's only something like a little over half of developers go through traditional universities to learn how to develop software. I mean, it is it is a significant number, but it's also a huge number who don't.
Okay. And it should be our one of our goals to try to address as many pathways in as possible. Writing tools, things like SKF for people who want to do it hands-on, or somebody wants to sit down and watch a webinar.
So
Oh,
Emily's
David, that
suggestion,
third job. Man, you think I made a money, David?
Emily's suggestion for the rewording, are we going to
Absolutely.
replace 5.2 with that, or are we going to make it in addition to 5.2? I think I saw a couple thumbs up there.
I'm good with the replacement.
Okay. Going to accept it and mark it. And David has the third role on there, which would have us increase the total people to 3 people instead of 2 people.
And remember, we've already hired some people. Now we're looking at hiring more people in the future.
Well, we're looking for people, whether we hire them or pay them some other way.
Yes.
So, yeah, if you mean hiring just in general sense of getting people, yep.
Go with this.
We move on to 5.3. So we talked about hiring a librarian. And this 5.3 addresses that, where we create and curate development security practices library in an open educational resource platform. So we have some dollars for a person to be the librarian and some money for some type of platform with which to store our resources.
Crow, we had noted on here that this feels related to 1.2.1 and 4.1. And the open question is this actually a future year 2 goal, or is this something that needs to be moved up into year 1 to what we already have above? Sebastian has his hand up.
Thank you. I was wondering if this is related to MITRE's attack library, which is a very good resource for learning about vulnerabilities in software, not specific vulnerabilities of packages, but rather the broad categories in which these vulnerabilities come.
I don't think it's directly related to that intentionally, but I think that the attack library is an excellent resource and probably something we need to figure out how to incorporate into our corpus of materials. But this is a particular, we're going to, we have a bunch of material today. We're going to be making new material or finding links. We're going to need to have somebody to help curate and organize it for us. That's what this is, the intention of this is.
And so such external libraries could be incorporated or linked to from this?
Absolutely.
Right, I see.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And we haven't really talked about the attack framework, and I think that potentially is maybe an advanced secure development course. Any additional thoughts on 5.3? And thank you for that suggestion, Sebastian.
The wording is actually exactly what we have in 1.2.1 above.
Is it?
It is almost exactly. Yes.
Man, you and I are going to have some work to do.
Yeah.
We are hiring a librarian. We have 0 details. So group, do we feel, before I move to Avishai, let me ask a question. Do we feel we want to hire this librarian person year 1 or defer to year 2? What is our inclination?
Year 1.
Year 1?
I've got over a decade of experience in library science and libraries. And let me tell you, if you try and backfill this sort of stuff, it's kind of like trying to slap a coat of security on it after the fact. It just isn't going to work well. And you're going to need more than one librarian and an extra budget just for bourbon.
We're going to be hiring a librarian, Vicki, if you're available.
I am not an MLIS, but I do know several. And I know exactly where to go posting that.
So we have a strong endorsement to move to year 1. Any seconds or alternate thoughts? Thumbs up.
There's some in the comments as well.
Great. All right. So we'll move it to year 1. And Avishai, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, that's quite all right, because that was exactly my point that I also wanted to say. So +1.
Okay. So let's note down here in section 5, David, that we'll move this up to year 1. Thank you, sir.
So the follow-up question on that, and there's some more chat stuff I have to look at. The follow-up question on that is the next 2 rows are actually sub rows of this task. So I'm not sure if they need to be moved up as well.
I agree.
Is everyone in agreement of that? Or do we need to talk through them?
It seems like its own thing.
So we have some feedback that 5.3.1 can move up under 1.2.1 and 5.3.2 might be better as year 2.
No, well, really, it could move in year 1, but I don't think it's a subset of 5.3. I think that's its own thing.
Separate task.
It's a separate task. I don't know how that got subsetted in. At least it's not a secure practices library in my mind.
Let's start with 5.3.1. Does everyone agree this is a subtask of the librarian and the library? I see thumbs, I see nods. And we all agree that this should be moved up underneath it in 1.2.1 above. Okay. Let's talk about 5.3.2 then.
Okay, so I do know, please excuse me, a little background on this. There's actually several papers that found that you know, they're trying to go backwards to see where did this insecure software come from, and if the answer was it's a Stack Overflow answer, then you're doomed, because because the correct answer for many software developers is how do I do something? I Google Stack Overflow and I copy the first answer into my code. There are no other answers. And so if an insecure answer gets to the top of a Stack Overflow chain, there is no hope today, because there's currently no mechanism in Stack Overflow to say, you know, from an organization level, there are some mechanisms to do it, but it's not something that they normally try to counter. How's that? There are some people who have very, very high Stack Overflow. Is it Karma? I've forgotten their metric name, but anyway, who have a very, very high value and can actually influence this kind of thing. But we would have to work with those people and get the right answers in order to, you know, basically find those and fix those. And it seems like that's a very focused task, but not a bad idea.
So
I think that this makes, I mean, this would be a clear, quantifiable outcome of the language domain specific roles, right? If they're creating content, they should also be able to reach out. It's a little bit more of like a security researcher feeling role, but yeah, I mean, this would be really high priority for me. So
we've already committed so far to do a lot in year one. Are you okay with it being a year two? If we get to it early, great, but try to actually focus blood and treasure on it in year two. Is that all right? Okay. Sebastian.
Thank you. I wanted to point out that Stack Overflow may not be the best place to do this kind of correction. And
Really?
not to say,
Why?
well, not to say that developers don't copy code, but Stack Overflow answers are distributed under a Creative Commons license. And those are becoming increasingly unpopular as code licenses because they don't have provisions for patents. And so it seems to me as if the general sentiment is that CC code is not FOSS and should not be included in FOSS software. I'm not sure it necessarily matches the OpenSSF attitude, the OpenSSF slant on security, to limit the focus to Stack Overflow.
If I may be so bold, I don't think Joe Developer knows or cares. They don't know what a CC is in many cases. What's a CC? What's a license? Does copyright apply? I mean, there's still a large number of people who argue that copyright doesn't apply. I'm not saying that's a good viewpoint. I will tell you, by the way, the law has not been repealed, and laws apply. But the reality is, if you want to get code snippets, this is where they get acquired. I don't know of any other places. I'm sure there are some, but I'll bet it's the 98 2% rule. You know, the vast majority of folks right now are getting it from Stack Overflow, unless things have radically changed in the last year, in which case of course, I'm certainly willing to be educated, but
Yeah,
we can talk about the licensing issues. I have some opinions on that, but I think the problem is right now we need to reach people where they are.
thing is, if we are contributing code snippets directly, we need to be careful to make sure that they are FOSS in some way that maintains the, the current standards.
Sure. Nothing forbids you from also licensing code snippets under other licenses like MIT and so on. You're thinking specifically of CC0, I think, and I don't remember which license Stack Overflow uses. I'm not sure it's CC0.
I don't think any of the Creative Commons licenses have explicit permissions for patents. But yes, you're right. You can use other licenses if you explicitly state them.
Right, right. But and of course, there's the other problem that for a lot of cases, we're talking very short snippets where it's unclear that copyright applies, de minimis, and then we can have legal discussions and bring in the lawyers. If we submitted code snippets and added to them license statements, that would be awesome. But I think step one is where are the developers, where are they getting the code snippets that are vulnerable? And at least all the research that I have, I mean, there's several papers about this, and all the research seems to flow back to it's all from Stack Overflow. That's where they're getting the vulnerable code, and that's where it never ends, because once something gets voted highly because it works, there's no mechanism. There's just not enough people know about security to ever downvote it, unless someone specifically has the job. I'm going to lower my hand now.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds good. It sounds like an operational consideration for the licensing. Rather.
Yeah, it's a good point. Go ahead, Sal and Dave.
Yeah, I mean, this is a bridge I think we can be crossing in a year, see what the integration can look like. But actually, I think what would be beneficial is, I mean, we're not here to replace every answer to cybersecurity questions on Stack Overflow, right? But if we can find a way to highlight and just say, hey, look, this snippet type, or this has been known to be a CVE, I just want a tag that has some salience to a Stack Overflow user. We're not going to be providing them snippets in all cases, right?
Not in all cases. The goal was to identify the top ones. Just like we can't rewrite, we can't deal with all open source packages, but we can identify the critical ones. And there are existing papers that basically go back and do this. They basically, why does this vulnerability keep happening? And the answer is because that's the top answer on Stack Overflow. That's the answer. And I do agree. I think we ought to add to our comments. I think this discussion also raises the licensing issue, and we should include that in our proposed tweak here.
So we've got there's some suggested rewording going on, which I agree with the points that both David and Sal made. Stack Overflow is by far the most used one. It's not the only one, but it's by far the most used one. So I think we shouldn't limit our scope to it, but we should call it out as one of the areas that we do want to address. I also suggest that we make this one the new 5.3, just to keep stuff organized, because it's still going to remain a year 2 task. And that will disconnect it from the stuff we're moving up regarding the librarian.
I second that suggestion. And I also endorse what Emily has proposed.
Is everyone done making their suggested changes to the text? Dave's still working on it.
We can right now. The licensing discussion was a good one, and I tended to capture that because that's a great point.
It is.
And I also tried to clarify that this is the most widely used, because Sal's right. We're not going to be able to rewrite all code on the internet. Although feel free to try.
Not going to happen.
Get right on that.
Is everybody comfortable with the new wording in the middle column? Does anyone have anything to call out?
You know what? I would say build on existing research in this area. I don't think we have to call out the specifics, but there is such research, and before doing this, go look them up. We don't want to redo that work.
And when we turn into small groups and focus in on fleshing out what this point means, think about what resources we may need, people we need to deputize, or if we need to make this somebody's job. To think through those items. or do they need tools to help? Looking at in our last 10 minutes, this will be our last one for today, I think. 5.4, we have a suggestion to add a statement in the middle. So it would read, implement a system to track over time the number of people who've earned various certifications and number of OSS projects who have a maintainer who's earned certification. Add a badge certificate for maintainers who have security training, partner with other organizations to make information easily available. So we've talked about this before in other points earlier in the first year on the plan. Are we okay with that addition? And do we think $100,000 to put towards that effort is enough?
Didn't we do this earlier? I mean, we specifically mentioned, I think.
We
GitLab.
did. And this is, I think, as an expansion, this is year 2, we're expanding on it. Do we think 100 grand is enough?
Okay, can I suggest specifically I would say beyond.
You may, and I will let Emily talk while you do.
Indeed, and what was the other one? LinkedIn. I think those were the ones that we had targeted for year 1.
Emily.
So my question was whether or not this was explicitly intended to be separate from the success criteria of educational programs that were defined above, where we already talked about badging criteria, certification, completion measurements, and those kinds of activities. If this is called out more for a funding line item, then I would suggest moving the funding up to the previous coverage area where we have a larger pool to draw on for establishing measurement and metric tracking tools for that, rather than listing this separately.
The measurement has no funding or resourcing applied to it at this point, and this would potentially support those goals. Does that align with everybody else's thoughts?
There are 2 different points here, and I'm wondering if they're getting merged. The first one is just tracking this first sentence, tracking the certs, and I can easily see that getting merged up to the previous.
Well, I feel that metrics needs to be its own statement, and it's not necessarily something that is resourced. It's just an obligation we have to provide.
Okay. The second part, though, I think the goal was to get it, we wanted to get it within, make it so that it's very, very easy to see when people have certain certificates. Those 4 organizations, I think, were the initial targets. And then I think the goal was to go beyond those targeted organizations. At least that's how I understood this text to me.
And this item, like before we talk about tracking, this specific item says we're going to implement some system to do it, either acquire or write some type of tracking.
We want to start here next time with 5.4 because the 2 underneath it are sub bullets of it, and I think this might have to get split out. I know.
So close.
I was hoping, but
yes, we'll start here next time.
Yeah.
I agree.
And actually, we have a problem. We talked about the Stack Overflow, but we never gave a dollar figure, and that probably needs a dollar figure.
Yes. So we'll start at Stack Overflow and hopefully finish up our first review. And then David and I have some work into putting this into its final form for further refinement. All right. Do we have any final thoughts for the day as we have 6 minutes till the top of the hour?
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, it's excellent commentary today. I appreciate everyone's help and words and thoughts. If there are no other topics to talk about, we will start at Stack Overflow 5.3 next week. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate the collaboration. Enjoy your day.
See you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.